Earlier during the day, Kazuya dreams of him begging Kiriha not to leave him. Instead, he wakes up to find himself touching Chisato in class. As such, Chisato beats Kazuya as his friends Shiru and Osamu watch. After being lectured by Chisato, he heads up to the roof of the school to contemplate about his dream and his mother's obi. As Kazuya prepares to leave, he finds a wig on the floor and attempts to avoid it, but is grabbed by the wig. He's then saved from the wig by an unknown force, and Kazuya hears a voice in his head helping him. As such, the wig tackles Kazuya off the roof of the building. However, as Kazuya falls, he's saved by Kiriha, the girl from his dreams, by creating a cushion and manifesting herself in human form. Afterwards, Kiriha gives Kazuya a familiar greeting, but Kazuya has no recollection of her. Meanwhile, the amasogi's host reveals itself and continues their attack on Kazuya. Luckily, Kiriha saves Kazuya from the amasogi and she destroys it. As Kazuya tends to the unconscious host, Kiriha explains the concept of amasogi to him. Afterwards, Kazuya blushes at the thought of a girl liking him, but Kiriha tells him how that the host is actually a male cross-dressing as a female. Regardless, Kazuya returns home and greets his sister Kasumi before going upstairs to his room. As he thinks about what has happened earlier, he takes a nap. When he wakes up, he finds Kiriha sleeping with him under his sheets, so he screams. Kasumi then checks on Kazuya, but he insists that nothing happened, prompting Kasumi to leave. Afterwards, Kiriha introduces herself to Kazuya as his master. Later, during dinner, Kiriha starts making loud noises, attracting Kasumi's attention. Regardless, after dinner, Kazuya enters the bath to find Kiriha bathing, so they bathe together. After bathing, the two share Kazuya's bed as they sleep. Meanwhile, Kokuyu observes the curse in the city and receives instruction from a voice on how to act on it. The next morning, Kiriha attempts to wake Kazuya to no avail, so she starts stomping on him. After, he rushes to class only to be late. Thus, Chisato violently chastises Kazuya for being late, where he replies by blaming Kiriha. It's then revealed that earlier in the morning, Kazuya finds that he's running late due to her destroying his alarm clock. As he rushed out to school, Kiriha insisted on going with him, causing him to be even more late as he had to leave her in a box. Later, while having lunch with his friends, Kazuya laughs to himself for being able to trick Kiriha. Meanwhile, Shiru and Osamu talk about the rumors of a ghost sighting, so Shiru fantasizes about using the opportunity to get close to a girl. However, Chisato punishes them for Shiru's thoughts, reminding them that they still have work due. Shortly after, Kazuya studies with Chisato in the library, and they end up reminiscing about the time they studied together as children. Afterwards, she offers to go over to Kazuya's house to help him study, but he declines, not wanting her to encounter Kiriha. As he finishes up his work, he goes to take a book out, while Chisato leaves. As Kazuya is taking out books, Kiriha suddenly appears. Then, when Chisato goes to check on him, she informs him that she's unable to open the door. Thus, the two find themselves locked in the library and they're unable to break out with brute force. However, Kiriha shows herself to the two and Kazuya quickly drags her away to talk in private. Kiriha then explains amasogi to Kazuya and she introduces herself to Chisato, explaining the situation to her as well. As such, Kiriha gives both of them Metsu to detect amasogi. Afterwards, Kiriha attempts to force her way out with her spiral weave. However, the area transforms into a large hall consisting entirely of books, revealing that the entire library are actually amasogi. Kiriha is then attacked by the books, and a large book golem appears and begins to chase them. She realizes that Chisato is the amasogi's host and has Kazuya recount their previous actions in the library. After realizing that Kazuya's rejection of Chisato's study offered to be the trigger for the amasogi, Kazuya accepts Chisato's offer to return the library back to normal. After the ordeal, Chisato arrives at his house to study, only to find him sleeping with Kiriha. She then hits Kazuya and reminds him that she came over to help him study. Shortly after, Chisato gives pudding to Kiriha and she apologizes for creating an amasogi. Kiriha replies by telling her not to blame herself, and Kiriha blames Kukuru for not managing the curse properly. Please leave some love if you watched this far. The next day, Shiru is stopped by Kokyu on the streets to ask him about Kazuya. However, Shiru offers to bring Kazuya to her for a price. A flashback then occurs showing Kukuru, with Kiriha sealing Kazuya's memories at the Hakusen Shrine. Despite the risks it poses to herself, Kiriha agrees to having Kazuya's memories sealed. Back in the present, Shiru greets Kazuya with a dropkick, blaming him for his earlier troubles. Another flashback of the day before explains how Shiru brought Kokyu to a restaurant to eat, and when he offered to pay, she ordered everything on the menu. Shiru then tells Kazuya that he lost all his money and is now in debt to Osamu. Meanwhile, Kazuya has no idea of who Kokyu could be. Regardless, atop the school building, Kokyu listens to them and remembers her conversation with Kukuru from earlier. where Kukuri wanted her to bring Kazuya without making a commotion and without Kiriha. Suddenly, the other classmates begin to scream as they find out that their lunches are gone. Kazuya then confronts Kiriha about the missing lunches but is hit in the face. Chisato mentions the possibility of this being an amasogi, but he instead believes it to be a thief. Randomly, Kokuyu bursts through the classroom door with stolen lunches in hand and mouth, demanding Kazuya's whereabouts. Shuri recognizes Kokuyu from earlier, but Kokuyu does not remember him. She then confronts Kazuya and orders him to follow her. However, Kiriha intervenes and the two start to argue. Deciding to settle things via arm wrestling, Kiriha and Kokuyu face off in Suzura Temple-style arm wrestling, where Kiriha is found victorious. Afterwards, the group heads towards the Hakuzen Shrine, where Kazuya finds the path familiar despite having no memories of ever venturing there. Once arriving, Kokuyu introduces the group to Kukuri, where Kiriha explains that she won the right to come with them after winning the arm wrestle. After a brief argument, Kiriha quietly confronts Kukuri about the seal starting to weaken. Thus, Kiriha suggests that she reapply the seal immediately, but Kukuri refuses, offering up an alternate solution. She then tells Kazuya that he'll become the region's exorcist, but Kiriha rejects the idea. She continues on to tell Kazuya that he's the one responsible for the recent occurrences of amasogi. Suddenly, Kiriha tries to run away with Kazuya, but they get locked in by a barrier. At the same time, Kokuyu carries Chisato into the air and Kukuri prepares to battle Kiriha and Kazuya. In response, Kiriha tries to fly away with Kazuya, but she gets knocked down, where Kukuri engulfs them in water. As Kukuri uses Minazuchi, Kiriha protects herself and Kazuya from the attack, but she gets weakened. Kukuri launches another attack, causing Kiriha to be unable to protect both of them. Suddenly, Kazuya receives a dream of his mother giving him advice on what to do, where she tells him to protect Kiriha. As Kazuya reawakens, he finds himself being given CPR afterwards. He starts commanding Kiriha to fight. Meanwhile, Kukuri launches various attacks, causing Kazuya to find it difficult to get a grasp on her abilities. She ends up using Suzura Mizuchi, which Kazuya is able to counter using a water weave. After the barrier is destroyed, Kazuya finds Kiriha in the hands of Kukuri, where she demands him to become an exorcist, to which he agrees. As the battle concludes, Kukuri's Akuju falls off, causing her to transform into a childlike state where Kiriha mocks and bullies her in her new form. Shortly after, Kazuya, Kiriha, and Chisato leave the shrine with Kazuya carrying Kiriha home. At home, Kazuya observes Kiriha's shrunken state and checks if she's injured, causing her to tease him. Regardless, the two take baths and Kiriha remembers a past conversation she had with Kanaka. As she passed out, Kazuya has her rest on his bed as he fans her. Eventually, he asks Kasumi for her older clothes, causing her to misinterpret it as part of him developing sussy interest. He then immediately calls Chisato for clothes as well, but she tells him she'd be unable to get them to him immediately. Now in a dilemma, he meets up with Osamu, who provides him with the needed clothes. Later, Kazuya returns to his room with the clothes and also pudding that he bought along the way. However, when Kiriha checks the clothes, the two find out that they are of sussy nature, causing her to tease him about and wanting her to wear such sussy clothes. The next day at school, Osamu confronts Kazuya about the clothes, asking if he had fun as Kazuya attempts to clear up the misunderstanding.